Hey, friends, thanks for joining us here on the Invisible Strength podcast. If you ever feel overwhelmed by the pressure to eat healthy and clean 100% of the time, today's episode is for you. We are joined by professional chef and RA warrior Laura Rodriguez. She takes a unique approach to flare-free cooking, focusing on incremental steps and simple swaps so we don't get overwhelmed, frustrated, and frankly quit on eating healthy. Laura will share her journey with RA, her struggles with environmental triggers like mold in buildings, which is a trigger that we don't talk about enough and is more prevalent than many of us realize. So I'm excited to get into Laura's approach, give you guys some tips on eating cleaner and getting your family on board. Laura, thank you for joining us and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's so wonderful to be here.
As always, Chris, it's wonderful to have you here.
It's great to be here. So excited to have this conversation.
Laura, before we get into your RA journey, can you take us through who you are as a person and your experience being a chef?
Sure. Well, who I am as a person, well, I'm a wife and a mom. I have one daughter. I would say I'm a homesteader. We live on a small 2-acre farm and we have chickens and ducks and farm cats and that sort of thing, and a big garden of vegetables and fruits. And yeah, I love seasonal local eating, farmers markets, going out to restaurants, things like that. I love traveling. I'm a big traveler too. I've lived overseas in 2 different countries, and I've been to dozens of different countries. So I love that kind of stuff. What was your other question?
We just wanted to get you to know you. I know you have a
That's it.
dog too. We heard him before.
That's right. That's right. Made his presence known.
Yes, always.
Laura, can you tell us about your RA journey and how that came about?
Sure, yeah. So back in 2015, I was really struggling to lift containers of food off of the countertop at work to put them into their cooler bags. I was the executive chef for a nonprofit that delivers free organic healing meals to cancer patients every week, and so we
Mm,
basically did large scale meal prep. Yeah, so I used to have to like put the cooler bag below the counter and slide the food in. And I knew that this was not normal. And so I went to the doctor and was like, I'm having this pain in my wrists and my elbows. I can't do ordinary things. What's going on with that? And so they did all the testing and they were like, yep, you have rheumatoid arthritis. Here's a prescription. There's nothing you could do about it. Go home, take your medicine, come back in 6 months and we'll check on you. And I was like, so I had known that like food is medicine, obviously, because we're serving these really healthy, organic, seasonal meals to cancer patients, but I didn't know the why. And so I went to my the owner or the founder of the foundation and I was like, why don't we serve gluten, dairy, sugar, corn, soy, etc.? And she was like overwhelmed by that very loaded question. So she gave me this big box of books from her office and I took them all home and I read all of them in a couple weeks. It was all about, how to eat to fight inflammation, how to eat to you know, fight cancer. And I was instantly hooked because I saw in the books a lot of the things that the doctors were or like describing were like symptoms that I had. The eczema, the chronic migraines, the digestive issues, the poor sleep, all of those things. And so I kind of just started to realize that like I've had inflammation for a very long time. I was a very sick kid growing up. I had 21 different allergies. I was hospitalized for I got a penicillin shot and I learned that I was allergic to penicillin. Mold is one of my allergies. And I was hospitalized and nearly didn't make it through that. And they were like, if you ever have another shot of penicillin, you'll die. So I had to like wear that penicillin bracelet and all the things. And that kind of started after that is when I really started getting sick. I had asthma. I was just always in and out of the doctor, whereas my sisters were never sick. And so I can trace back my RA symptoms to being in high school, depending on what I would eat. I remember because I grew up in Chicago. And so hot dogs and burgers and fries and Italian beef and pizza, all of these things were staples every single day. And I can tell you, I can look back and go, okay, I know when I was eating certain things that I would have pain. And so I did gymnastics as a kid. I always thought that it was like sports related. But looking back on it now, I can tell you that I've definitely had rheumatoid arthritis since I was in high school for sure. but I wasn't diagnosed until I was 31.
Often after you're diagnosed, you reflect on previous symptoms and strange things that are happening, and all of a sudden it all starts to make sense. It's incredible that you worked for that foundation, and neat that you were able to get all that information, because so many times you have to seek it out through the internet and filter through what's legit and what's not. But you had a firsthand of experience of what to actually eat and why.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that's one of the things I hear a lot from people is like, there's so much conflicting information on the internet. Like, some people are literally trying to tell you if you have, pain or whatever the issue may be, they're literally trying to prescribe the carnivore diet for people. And I'm like, I think as a society, the last thing we need is more meat. And I'm not pro like plant based either. I don't think vegan is the answer either. I think personally, we need to eat a larger amount of fruits and vegetables, you know what I mean? And then sprinkle in some good protein here and there. And I think well-rounded diet is the best approach for me personally, and for my clients that I've seen.
I appreciate you saying that. I have been vocal about my opinion on elimination diets simply because they're so overwhelming. I end up getting just burnt out and frustrated, and I quit. So now I'm on this journey of taking a more step by step approach. I appreciate your programs and your workshops because you really focus on taking that incremental approach, not burning people out. So, can you talk more about how you approach this differently?
Sure. Yeah. So I have what's called the EPIC method, which means the first part is first mindset. So you have to first embrace a healing mindset. You have to know that healing is possible for you, that what you eat matters, and that nothing tastes as good as flare free feels, as I say. And then after that, we get into kind of like this peaceful transition away from what you're currently eating because everybody's on a different journey. You may be coming off of eating a primarily 60% ultra processed food diet. Chris might be coming off of, well, I'm in the habit of cooking at home and eating scratch made meals and whole foods, but I'm eating the wrong kinds of whole foods. I'm still putting heavy cream in my soup. I'm still cooking with butter. I'm still using all, AP flour. And so I like to recommend that folks peacefully transition away from what they're currently eating to eating an 80% flare free diet, which is gluten, dairy, sugar, corn, soy, peanut free, and anti inflammatory, meaning we're using pasture raised meat and eggs. We're using wild caught fish. We're using dirty dozen produce so that we're lessening our exposure to those harmful pesticides that can often be on a lot of our foods, but in a way that's not going to break the bank, right? We're using non toxic cooking oils like avocado oil and olive oil instead of the canola oil that, as a chef, I was trained to use for everything, right? And so I don't want to do it in a way that shocks your taste buds and pisses off the whole family, right? So what I recommend is you do something called food chaining. And I'm sorry if we're not allowed to cuss on this podcast.
Okay.
I recommend what's called food chaining. So you identify your family's favorite foods, right? If you love grilled cheese and tomato soup, I'm not saying don't eat grilled cheese and tomato soup anymore. I'm just saying eat a better grilled cheese and tomato soup. And that can start by maybe your food chain is let me go ahead and buy the organic whole wheat bread. Right. And then I can work up to eating a gluten free bread. Maybe it's a gluten free white bread because that's more palatable for my family. And then I'm going to work up to eating a gluten free whole grain bread. Maybe I'm gonna buy myself the organic, real, like actual cheddar cheese instead of buying the Kraft singles that I grew up eating. And then I'm gonna try to move on to eating a soy-free vegan sliced cheddar for my grilled cheese. So that's kind of the way that I approach it because when you do it this way, you're allowing the basal cells in your taste buds to turn over every 10 days and come along with you on this journey to cleaner eating. You're not going from my kids love mac and cheese and grilled cheese and chicken nuggets to we're eating kale, salads, and salmon and brown rice and broccoli. That is never going to stick. It doesn't even stick for most adults. And that's where we end up flaring and at rock bottom again and saying healthy eating doesn't work. This is a bunch of baloney. I just need to get back on my prednisone. Okay. After you've peacefully transitioned away from your current diet, I teach people to learn how to identify and classify their specific food triggers because corn is a big trigger for me. Soy, not so much, but I don't eat a lot of soy anyway. And sugar and gluten are my two biggest triggers. So I can have a little bit of dairy now and then. But like for everybody's going to be different, right? Especially because as you're healing, your gut is healing. That leaky gut is closing up. Your gut microbiome is getting better. You're getting more like natural healthy gut bacteria, and so you can start to tolerate different things over time. But once you identify and classify your own personal triggers, then you can start to do what I call is flare-free math, meaning you start to indulge in some of your trigger foods on occasion within your own personal threshold. Okay. So that you can enjoy your life. You can go to the family cookout. You can go to the beach vacation. You can go, if you're a foodie like me, you want to go out and try the new restaurant. And so you can do that without flaring. And that's kind of the transition that I take my students on so that it's attainable, it's approachable, it's doable, and they don't give up after a couple weeks.
That's really awesome. Because there's so much that you're saying, Lord, that really resonates. Like Karen knows that I cut out meat about 6 years ago, and I tried to bring my family along for the journey, and we had like a rebellion. Like I recently, in the last like week or two, it almost felt like a regime change. Like my wife and I were like, the boys can have chicken again, and they almost danced in the streets. They were just so excited about it. But just thinking about that food chain and talk about, because you mentioned a lot of really good food. I've been watching the Bear, so I'm hip to some of the Chicago food, the Italian beef and the hot dogs and all that. How would you do food chaining from that standpoint? Because there's certain foods that it's like cost prohibitive to get like the best quality beef, or cost prohibitive to say like, oh, I'm gonna like even get a better type of bread. So I'm just thinking about the ways in which people can do this if they're like in food deserts, or if they're in spaces where getting access to quality produce isn't as easy.
Yeah, that's a really tough question that I think our government needs to work on answering because I'm not going to sit here and say, because I grew up in a food desert. Okay. I understand. Like, I'm from the south side of Chicago. I grew up very poor. I ate out of vending machines most nights as a kid. I totally understand what you're saying. But there are certain things that we can do to say we want to eat Italian beef. Okay. You're not going to be able to get a gluten free bun. You're not going to be able to get grass fed beef and make it all from scratch on your own. That's the ideal thing that we can maybe work up to one day if we're in an area where we can find and afford those things. But in the meantime, what I would suggest, okay, this is what I do. When I go back home to Chicago, I still eat Italian beef, but I have it without the bun and I'll have it with fries. So I'll have like just the beef with the giardiniera, with the cheese, and then the fries on the side. So we can absolutely make that with whatever beef we can find and afford. So even if it's just ground beef,
Mm-hmm.
even if it's just ground beef, we can make us either, some like I cut up potato wedges. We can make our own little fries at home in the oven. We can do ground beef or we can do shredded beef or we can just do sliced steak if we want to. The giardiniera that comes out of the jar, we can serve it like that or we can make a rice bowl with it. You know what I'm saying? We could serve it with rice, we could serve it with the meats, with the toppings, and we can start like that. And that would be one small way because no matter how you cook at home, okay, even if you're using the cheapest, most readily available options to you, even if it's just a plain bag of white rice, that plain bag of white rice and that ground beef, even if it's the cheap factory farm kind that's not grass fed, which grass fed has those omega 3s and the vitamin A and the vitamin D, which is what we need to fight autoimmunity. But even if we were to use the cheapest options, that's still going to be less inflammatory to our system than buying the one from the sandwich shop down the street, right? Hopefully, we're cooking our potatoes in some olive oil at the bare minimum at home, right? So now we're lessening our exposure to those toxic cooking oils, to the restaurants use the cheapest, crappiest food possible. They just do, even though it tastes so good. Okay. There's going to be food additives, there's going to be all this stuff. And so, whatever we can do to make it at home with whatever tools we have, that's the first starting point. And then you can slowly work up to, well, let me see, maybe I can find a gluten-free bun somewhere, or maybe this week I can try to save up a little bit of money and try to get the grass-fed ground beef, right? It's definitely a process and it's definitely a journey, but I think when you approach it that way, instead of saying this is unattainable, I can't do it at all, the only other option is getting sicker, getting a second or a third autoimmune diagnosis, getting cancer, getting heart disease, getting diabetes. So we have to do whatever we can in our power. And that's where it's so important to have resources and a guide and a community to support you because otherwise it's overwhelming. We don't know what to do and we think we can't do anything at all. And then we shut down, right? So I hope I answered your question. That was a tough one. You're coming with the heat today.
You inspired me. You inspired me. 'Cause I love this conversation because I think it's so important. Like the work that we in the conversations we get to have with folks with autoimmune conditions, it allows you. At least I know I've asked this quite a bit to people. I'm just like, what are you eating? And for a lot of folks, they just because of the stress of it, like there's not even placing blame, but just because of the stress of everything, especially when you've been newly diagnosed, like I haven't even thought about it. Like people are bringing me food. I'm not even like I don't have the space or the luxury to meal plan. I feel so sick. So I think it's really wonderful the way you shared that. Like, oh, yes, you might not be able to start shopping at Whole Foods or even go to a farmer's market, but you can still make adjustments right where you are. So I really appreciate your answer.
I do want to chime in really quickly because what I teach my students is to shop at your local grocery store. I live in a small town in Portland, Tennessee. Our only grocery store here is called Food Lion. I'm sure you've never even heard of that
Yes, I
before.
know Food Line has held
Okay.
me down.
So and my food line now, and it wasn't this way 10 years ago when we moved here, but about the last 5 years, they've been getting in organic, they've been getting in grass fed. Like it's not many options, but they have it. And so I can even get it at Food Lion. I only shop at Whole Foods for 2 out of my 8 clients because they specifically asked me to. So, no, you don't have to shop at Trader Joe's. You don't have to shop at Whole Foods. You don't have to shop at Sprouts or the farmer's market. Healthy food is becoming more mainstream. You just have to know what to look for when you're at the grocery store because we get so trained in seeing the brands that we already know and love that we don't even see what else is on the shelf.
Absolutely. Thank you for that.
Laura, you have shared one tip to help people who can't buy organic soaking produce. And can you share what that is?
So the science shows a lot of people initially think, oh, if I wash my vegetables with vinegar, I can take off pesticides. But what the research shows is if you soak your vegetables in a baking soda and water for 20 minutes and then rinse them underwater, it actually takes off way more pesticides than vinegar and water does. I forget the actual statistic, but you can Google it. It's out there. And so it's 1 teaspoon of baking soda in 1 gallon of water. It's not much. And so I would get myself like a designated plastic tub that I would put in the sink and put everything in there or a big bowl or something just so that I'm not having to clean the sink every time I want to load it up with vegetables. And I would try that, and that will easily help it to where you don't have to spend extra on organic if you can't afford it.
I appreciate that because sometimes it's just organic isn't always an option as we're talking about it. So that's a nice second best solution. I'll also mention we're not affiliated or sponsored by Misfits or Imperfect Foods, but I'll say that's a good option for you got to search the sales, but because it's direct to consumer, it tends to be not as expensive as some of the stuff in stores. And then you save yourself a trip to the grocery store too.
And it's free delivery over $60, which it's easy to spend $60 on groceries. We order from Imperfect Foods every week, but honestly, we typically order just our meat and our eggs and our vegan dairy products because it's so much cheaper than the grocery store. You can get pastured eggs, you can get grass-fed beef, you can get all sorts of wild seafood. The seafood's really affordable too. And it's helping cut down on that waste, which is like 40% of all food is wasted in America, which is crazy when we have homeless people and people living in food deserts and all of the things.
Right.
It's crazy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So tell me a bit. Now, I want to go back to when you said you were doing sports and like you think that you had RA even back then.
Mhm.
Like, what was it like for you in your own journey when, we're talking about what you've done, the wonderful work you've been doing for your clients, but what was it like for you in your own journey when you had to make those transitions? Like, were there foods that you were really attached to? Like, but this is how I've always made my grilled cheese. Like, what was the journey like for you?
Listen, sir. Okay. The reason why I help people on this journey is because it took me so long to heal because I was stubborn. Okay. So I
Yeah.
used to live in Italy. So I see people every day eating pizza, pasta, gelato, all the
Right.
things. And you think, there is no way that bread is the problem for me. I was really hesitant to cut out gluten. And so it
Yeah.
was the last thing I took out of my diet. So what I did was I gave myself a full week. I started with sugar. I was like, that's fine. I'll start putting honey in my coffee and tea or in my coffee instead of sugar. So I started with that. stopped drinking soda, whatever else I could do to stay away from sugar for 1 week. My symptoms didn't get better. By the way, at that time, I had eczema and migraines real bad. Those are my other two main symptoms. So then the second week, I'm like, okay, well, let me take out dairy. So I took out, and honestly, at that time, I wasn't even as gung ho as I am now. So what I did was I took out the most inflammatory dairy. So I would allow myself to eat a little bit of sheep's milk cheese and a little bit of goat's milk cheese here and there. So second week, I'm now sugar free and dairy free. My symptoms didn't go away at all. So then the third week, I'm like, okay, even though I don't believe, I mean, bread is in the Bible for crying out loud. So there's no way that gluten is a problem, right? I was really stubborn about that. And so I was like, okay, fine, I'm going to do gluten. So week 3, I'm now gluten, dairy, sugar free. And my symptoms didn't get any better. But I was like, wait a second. That's when I realized that I was still drinking beer after work. I
Wow.
didn't know that beer was made of gluten.
Yeah,
So I
yeah, yeah.
started drinking wine instead. Okay. So I'm on week 4 now. And like I would say, once I hit week 4, I was on that train for another couple months. And it wasn't until I was month 3 when my healing really started to skyrocket.
Mhm.
So it took me a while to get there because I just didn't believe it at first. Okay. So once I hit that 3-month marker, my eczema, my migraines, my joint pain completely went away. And I haven't had a migraine or eczema since. Okay. Now, I did go on to have another rock bottom moment in my health, as you had mentioned, Karen, about I was working in a mold infested building. I mean, there was mold coming out of the vents, and I don't want to jump too far ahead. I know you have questions about that, but the mold, the stress of being a full time private chef to a country music star, a very high demand job, working 12 to 14-hour days,
Yeah.
being on call all the time. You never know what's gonna what's gonna be pinging on your phone. I ended up almost losing my ability to walk. And not only because of the mold and the stress, but largely because of my food. Because working such long days, I didn't have the capacity to cook for myself. So I was eating whatever I could get my hands on. And I hit rock bottom again. So it wasn't like, oh, I got better in 2015 and I've been great since. I've had my ups and downs, just like all of us do. But it's taught me that the missing link in all of this is not knowing what to do, because you can know what to eat. Still, I was cooking flare free for my clients, but I wasn't eating flare free for myself. It's all about consistency and community support and having somebody to turn to when things get hard so you can stay the course. Because I'm telling you, once you get off track, it's so easy to just stay off track. It's so easy to let other people feed you. And I don't care where you're eating. If you're eating off of the hot bar at Whole Foods, it's not going to be the same as cooking flare free for yourself at home. It's never going to be the same.
I appreciate where you went with it. And sidebar, you've dropped so many gems. You said, if food's not going to be the same as when you cook it. You talk about bread being in the Bible. I'm enjoying the gems that you've dropped. But I'm stuck on this point too, because I know so many people. I'm just like actually seeing as you're speaking, Laura. I'm seeing people who have told Karen time and time again, they don't have enough time to cook for themselves. So if you're someone like I'm thinking about the folks who, they have a busy career, maybe they're parents, maybe they have just like whatever the extenuating circumstances are. How do people make the time to cook? Like what sort of like meal prep wisdom can you tell them right now?
Yeah. This is so important because the way that I teach it now, I discovered this method out of pure necessity, out of being at rock bottom. I quit my job as a full time private chef. I was like, I got to get out of this moldy building. I moved back to my house in Portland, Tennessee. I quit my job. Okay. I decided I was going to give myself a couple weeks to get better, and then I would start taking on personal chef clients again. So I gave myself 2 weeks, but I couldn't stand on my feet and cook in the kitchen 3 times a day, even though I knew that I needed to eat flare free every single day, 3 times a day to start feeling better. So I could get my energy back, so I could stop wearing these. I used to have these, I still have them. I keep them in my closet. So I see them every day as a reminder of where I don't want to go back to. They're these, $250 shoes with these $500 custom orthotic inserts that I had made from a podiatrist. And I wore them all day, every day, no matter where I was, even if I was on the beach walking with my family, if I was in the garden, which normally I'd be barefoot in my garden, grounding. I had to have these shoes on and I still had pain. So I couldn't stand on my feet and cook 3 times a day every day. So what I started to do is experimenting. Okay. I started to put all the meals I would normally make, tacos, if I was making pasta, if I was whatever I wanted to eat for my family, okay? Because I never liked the idea of if you have to meal prep, you're cooking chicken and you're cooking asparagus and you're cooking sweet potatoes and you eat that over and over again for 5
Right,
days.
right, right.
I can't do it. So I started to make the meals that I normally cook, but in a way that allows me to cook and clean in half the time. So I started to spread out all of my food on sheet trays and cook it in the broiler. The broiler is essentially a 500-degree oven. So just logically, you're going to be able to cook faster if you don't burn everything. You got to do it a specific way. And so I learned that if I can cook a couple recipes, 2 or 3 recipes at a time, I can eat flare free for 2 to 3 days at a time. Okay. So I take whatever time that I had, whatever energy I had, I would spread stuff out on the sheet trays in the broiler, cook them, package it up, put it in the fridge, and then I would rest. Okay. Now, whenever I get hungry or it's meal time, I'm just reheating everything and eating it. So, this is the ticket. And 10 days later, I was barefoot in my garden again. And I'm not lying to you. I was
And they
barefoot in my garden again. Now, my pain wasn't completely gone, but I wasn't having to wear shoes inside the house.
yeah,
Okay. I wasn't having to wear shoes in the garden. And before this, I wasn't even able to wear flip flops and it was summertime. So I was back in my flip flops. I was back on my feet. And that gave me the energy and the motivation to continue on this journey of being consistent. And then slowly but surely, I was able to start going back to cooking the traditional way. But I also started to use this method for my personal holistic chef clients because I needed to make money, but I didn't want to be in the kitchen all day long.
mhm,
So I can tell you unequivocally, without a doubt, this method is the best way to cook and clean in half the time so that you can start getting your life back, so you can get your energy back to do other things and get out from underneath these debilitating symptoms that autoimmunity can give you.
yeah. No,
I
wonderfully
love
said.
the sheet pan cooking because as someone who's not a cook, like my husband does all the cooking, but I can do the sheet pan. Like it's so easy. All you do is chop it up, throw it on a pan and put it in the oven. Like does not require major skills whatsoever.
And the way that I teach it, because, I just want to remind you, I'm coming off of 2.5 years of cooking from 6:30 in the morning to 7:30 at night. Okay. As a
Oof,
private chef to a country music star. I was like, I'm not doing the farmer's market groceries. I'm not, because you have to wash these vegetables extra. You have to chop everything from scratch. So another added layer that I teach my students to do is to buy the pre-chopped vegetables. The
mm,
grocery store has a container of diced onions. They just came out with it. I just shared this in my cooking class that I did live on Instagram. It's free and available on my Instagram profile. I just shared this. They just came out with this. They now have a bag of freshly chopped garlic. They used to do pre-peeled garlic, and that's what I always recommend people buy. But this is a bag. It's just a cryovac bag of just garlic. So it's not the one that comes in the jar with all the canola oil or cottonseed oil or whatever. And so I recommend, in addition to the fast cooking method, and this is why I literally say you can cook and clean in half the time. We're taking pre chopped vegetables, we're dumping them on a sheet tray, and we're putting them in the broiler. There is barely any chopping in my method. So if you have severe arthritis and you can't hold a knife, or you have severe lupus and or Hashimoto's and the pain is all throughout your lower body and you can't stand, you don't have to for long.
When autoimmune disease is effectively being managed by medication. So not currently experiencing symptoms, but on a lot of medication to suppress the immune system. So when you don't have that immediate feedback on the food triggers, how do you navigate that?
That's a tough question. I would say you probably won't be able to.
Okay.
I don't think you would necessarily be able to, but what I would recommend is to like get off your meds for a little bit if you can, with the help of your doctor. See if they will allow you to get off of it and try some of these potential food triggers so that you can feel the difference because for most of us it's going to be pretty rapid. If I were to eat a standard cookie that had gluten, dairy and sugar in it, I would feel it in my feet pretty rapidly. And so I'm not necessarily sure you would be able to feel any of these triggers. Now, a lot of my clients, they come to me still in pain despite being on their medication. And that's when they decide to eat flare free. And I will tell you, I have dozens of students that come to me, the medication's not working. They finally decide they've got to do more than what their doctor can offer them. They start following my program, they eat flare free, and they get off of their medication all entirely. So, to answer your question, I'm not sure it would work. If the medication is working for you and you don't have any symptoms and you can't feel how food hurts you, you probably have to get off your medication to experiment with it. But there's a lot of folks that are on medication, it's not helping them, it's not enough. And in those instances, flare free can really help you, not only just make the medication work better, but maybe even one day be able to get off of it entirely.
Hmm.
Well, you bring up a good point because that's what triggered my whole journey of trying to eat cleaner is my symptoms weren't being managed on medication. And when I cut out, I did mostly dairy for a while, and the gluten, I could tell the inflammation went down very rapidly. So, but at this point, with it being managed, it's like, well, I'm still striving to eat cleaner and get to that point where you're 100% flare free cooking. And then hopefully I can reduce my medication.
Yeah, you can do it.
Indeed, man. It's just amazing to think about the ways in which eating that's in a manner that's helpful for you can really like turn your life around dramatically. Like, I'm still stuck on just like within 10 days you being back in that garden. I guess I'm also curious to know the ways in which as you're promoting this way of being in this modality, has there been any sort of like pushback? Because I know that whenever I've posted about anything about lupus, I get like a lot of bots that are pushing all these like, miracle cures and things of that nature. What sort of resistance have you encountered as you're, trying to promote flare free cooking?
I haven't really experienced a lot of pushback. I understand the bot thing. You have to be careful with like what words you say sometimes. Like if you say like food is medicine, that can really trigger a lot of people who are trying to like sell you herpes medication for some reason.
Definitely.
But man, I would say, I guess because my journey and my business is so rooted in my own personal journey and my not only my own personal success, but like the success of the people around me, the folks that come in. I've had a student say to me, I mean, this happens so much. I've had a student say to me, this woman literally, she's 21 years old. She just came out of being hospitalized for weeks, um, very, very ill and very resistant and very skeptical. She came into my program. She was like, I'm going to commit to this for 30 days. Within 21 days, she felt like almost all of her symptoms had subsided. And
Wow.
that's what I wanted to say. You had touched on something beginning of your question. If you look back to my story, when I first started, I was skeptical. I only took out one ingredient at a time, 1 week at a time. It took me 3 months to get better. Now, the second time I hit rock bottom, I was like, I have to eat flare free from the jump 3 times a day, every day. It only took 10 days to get better.
Yeah.
So, depending on the severity of your symptoms, depending on how long you've been sick, and depending on how hard you hit it, I'm telling you, most people feel better within 30 days, but you can't do it half-assed. The thing about it is you can take, and this is why I share my method of peacefully transitioning away, because in the beginning, that really helps you to make it stick. For a lot of folks that are like, I've tried to do it, but it's too hard and I can't do it. It's not that you're not strong enough. You just need a better way that helps you do it in a way that feels good to your nervous system. Do it in a way that makes the kids happy. Do it in a way that tastes good, right? Now, if you've been doing it for a long time and you're already in the habit of like cooking at home and eating better, but you just need to eat better ingredients, that's where you can just come in and start following my recipes and commit to doing it for 30 days and you'll get better right away. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So there's many different roads to Mecca. It's just about like what you need, how you need to approach it. And inside my program, I help people in a very customized one-on-one way so that everybody deserves the chance to be successful. Healthy
Hmm.
eating should not be something that's unattainable and out of reach. It should be across the board something that we all have access to.
I agree. We talked a good bit about a good amount about food, but just also I remember you talking about like adding like honey to your coffee. Just wondering about, the use of like water in your recovery, and for a lot of folks who, I've colleagues in my life who they wake up with a soda, right? Like that's the first thing that they're grabbing. It's like that's their coffee. They may have like a sort of carbonated beverage. What sorts of ways can you do that same sort of like food chaining technique but with beverages?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would recommend, say you love soda, I would recommend trying something like a poppy soda, which a lot of
Mm,
folks say tastes more similar to what they're used to drinking. It does have sugar in it, but it also has some probiotics and prebiotics, which is good for the gut. And we know that autoimmunity is rooted in poor gut health, right?
yes.
And leaky gut. And so I would start with like a poppy. Then I would slowly transition to like a Zevia, which is a stevia sweetened soda. Not all of them taste great. I believe their Coca Cola tastes more like a Diet Coke. Their root beer is really good, tastes pretty much the same. And then I would transition to what's called Olipop, which is a stevia sweetened soda, but has the prebiotics and the probiotics like the poppy does, but without the sugar.
Mm,
That would be my food chain for soda. For coffee, I would recommend transitioning to like like say you love to put like creamer in your coffee and sugar. Why don't we try something like a nut pods, which is a dairy-free creamer? Well, let's back it up. Why don't we try an organic creamer, right? Try buying the organic half and half. Then you can start to food chain to like what is it called? The nut pods, which is a dairy-free creamer. Most of it comes unsweetened. So I would recommend buying those little monk fruit packets. So monk fruit is it's a sugar-free alternative, or it's a sugar alternative. It's from a little gourd in Southeast Asia. And to me, it tastes just like sugar. It's a very, very sweet. It comes granulated. To me, it's 1 to 1. So I would do like nut pods with some monk sugar or monk fruit sweetener. And then slowly but surely, ideally, you want to get away from adding the sweetener to our food because that's going to help um, our gut microbiome by helping us fight a lot of fungal overgrowth, which can happen very easily to anybody that eats a high carb, high sugar diet, aka the standard Western diet. So I don't want you to think I have to go from drinking Coffee Mate in my coffee every day to drinking black coffee. That what I was aspiring to do, and it took me a little while to get. Well, actually, it took me a whole year. No, it took me 2 years at first to get to drinking black coffee. We don't want to do that, and we also don't want to do what AIP suggests, which is to rip coffee out altogether. Right?
mhm.
There are organic coffees that are third party tested for mold that you can try. Because I know one of the things that makes coffee so inflammatory is really high in mycotoxins, right? And mycotoxins are the toxins that mold puts off when it's present. So things like, like grains, beans, salami, nuts, coffee, chocolate, all of these things can have mycotoxins present. And so there's a way to food chain and keep what you love, but in a way that actually loves you back, and it's
Love
possible.
that. Yeah, I love that. Thank you.
Yes.
So, talking about coffee and some of these other foods that are more prone to mold, in your experience working in a mold infested building, how much do we need to be concerned about mold in our food?
Say it probably doesn't affect it's not gonna affect you if you're not living or working in a place that has water damage, right? You can have a little bit of unless you're eating salami 3 times a day every day, the mold is your body right? Your body should be able to handle a little bit of that mold that comes from the food. But it also depends, like, how immunocompromised are you, right? How leaky is your gut, right? Because when we have a leaky gut and we eat these things, now that those mycotoxins are floating around in our system, and our immune system could be attacking that as a foreign invader, right? And so it depends on a lot of things. Many of us people with autoimmunity are like the canary in the coal mine, right? We can work in a moldy building for a month, and now all of a sudden our symptoms start to increase. Okay. And we're all of a sudden having this crazy fatigue. We're all of a sudden like gaining weight out of nowhere. Whereas people like my husband, who hasn't been sick a day in his life, can live, work in a moldy building and never know the difference, right? So it depends on you and how you react. If you realize that you're sicker when you're in certain buildings, or that all of a sudden you have this onset of rapid symptoms that you never had before and you're working in a new place, And on top of that, you're eating blue cheese on your salads, you're drinking coffee multiple times a day, you're eating salami every day at lunch, you're putting nuts on everything. Eating all of these mold prone foods can really exacerbate your symptoms even more.
I was floored when I learned from you that half of buildings are affected. I had no idea it was that prevalent.
Especially down here in the South where we are because of the humidity levels, right? So
Right.
Sure.
maybe a little bit less up in the north area or out west, but definitely down here in the south, it's everywhere. And a lot of times mold is present in the drywall. You can't see it
Yeah.
or you can't smell it. And so it's a silent epidemic in my opinion.
Half is a lot.
Half is a lot.
Half is mind blowing.
Half is mind blowing. Yes. Half is a lot.
It shocked me. We have gone through a lot of information on food, mold, all of it. Is there anything else that is important to touch on that we haven't covered yet?
I would just say healing is possible. Okay. I know a lot of people listening might feel like, okay, but how is this going to help me? Anything can help you. Any little thing that you can do, whether it's drinking more water today or putting less coffee made in your coffee this morning, or maybe eating a little less blue cheese, or whatever it is that you feel like is attainable for you to try. Any little thing that you do is going to help, and healing is possible for you. It takes time. It takes patience, it takes a lot of diligence, and it takes a lot of support. I did it on my own because I didn't know one other person with autoimmunity when I started. And so for a lot of us, this can be very isolating. You might be the only one sick in your family. Nobody else has to eat healthy. Nobody else is feeling bad, right? So find yourself somebody and someone that you can turn to when it gets hard. You have this podcast, so there's a community for you, but keep the faith. Keep the faith and keep going and reach out for help if you need it, if you get stuck. Just know that healing is possible.
Appreciate that and want to reiterate the patience and the peaceful transition part because it doesn't need to be overwhelming and frustrating, which I experienced. It's very doable with this approach.
Yeah, I think a lot of
No doubt
people,
about
one
it.
thing that I hear a lot, right? People come to me after their doctor said, because a lot of people in my space are they have functional doctors who understand that food is medicine. And they tell them, you need to eat gluten, dairy, sugar, corn, soy free. And they're like, well, what can I eat then? That's kind of the first initial reaction is if I need to eat anti-inflammatory, that takes away all of my favorite foods. And I'm here to tell you that there are so many things you can eat, and not just the AIP way where we're putting coconut milk in everything. There's a much tastier way, okay? Not to hate on AIP. I know it does a lot of good work for a lot of people, but even last year they came out with this new guideline inside their own protocol saying actually most of our patients are getting better after just taking out the first few top most inflammatory foods and getting better even before they complete the full elimination diet. So that just tells you it doesn't have to be that restrictive. And if you need proof, go to my website, cheflaurarodriguez.com. I have a blog full of free recipes that are delicious and family friendly and easy to do. And that's just proof that it's possible. I mean, I make a living out of cooking for people, not because I make healthy food, but because I make tasty food. Does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense.
You mentioned you have a lot of great resources. One of your resources that really helped me was Sprint to Flare Free Cooking. You include the specific foods that you can buy by store. So she has it broken out by Aldi, Target, Walmart, Amazon. And so it's so easy to be like, okay, I'm looking for a cleaner flour. All right. There, that's what I need. And it takes a lot of the research out and just the effort. So I appreciate you providing that information.
Well, I'm so glad you enjoyed that. I think it's a nice little resource because, like you said, it's kind of like a neat little package of like, what should I eat? Let's start here. It's kind of like the top 20 pantry staples, and it tells you what brands taste best and where to get them. So, yeah, it's really helpful.
You are offering a free resource to our community. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I have a guide. It's called the Autoimmune Foodies Survival Guide, and it's going to teach you the steps that you need to take to start eating flare free more without sacrificing all of your favorite foods, without overwhelming yourself, and without, making the whole family like melt down at the dinner table. It includes 10 of my top best tasting anti inflammatory swaps, but it also details how to use them. So it'll teach you how to use the vegan butter that I love, how to use the AP flour that I love, and so on and so forth. So it's really helpful for anybody who's wanting to make these little swaps in a really approachable, tasty way.
Laura, I appreciate that. Thank you for all the incredible, helpful information and just making us feel better about easing into this process. So,
Yeah.
everyone, thanks for joining us today. Make sure you check out that guide in the description. Until next time, take care. Thanks, Chris, too.
Thank y'all. Thank y'all.
Thank you.